Governor says he has a new idea. And what is the new idea? He says he wants a 24-hour economy. 24-hour economy. He doesn't even understand that policy. Today in Ghana, our hospitals work 24 hours. Our electricity company works 24 hours. Our water company works 24 hours. Our phone companies work 24 hours. Miniature bars work 24 hours. Isn't it? Today, because of digitalization, the banks, you can transfer money 24 hours. You can receive money 24 hours. Isn't it? So he doesn't understand his own policy. It does not make sense. And I want you to vote in 2024, but I will bring a new vision. I will bring new policy, and we will transform this country. Drama is the past. Dr. Baumia is the future. Hospitals are open for 24 hours. You can buy electricity 24 hours.
You would recall that right from the beginning of this year, government has been updating the country on some key economic matters. You recall in April, or just at the end of March, when Cabinet held its first quarter retreat, I updated you all on the kind of economic pressures that we were of the view was going to befall us because of what was going on, and some of the measures that the government was introducing right at that time to help containment. That's where we introduced the cuts to budget and a few other measures as addressed by the finance minister. At the end of the second quarter, when Cabinet held its retreat and the President had the opportunity to see the numbers again, you recall the President instructed that we start negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, and so the statement was released on, I think, the 1st of July, just after the second quarter retreat. Since then, there have been a lot of engagements with the fund, and a number of statements have been released to update the Ghanaian public on how that is going, and it's going pretty well. This week, as we are coming to the end of may I say, the third quarter period, going into the final quarter fully, tomorrow morning, for example, the Central Bank, the Bank of Ghana, will be meeting the managing directors of some of the banks and the heads of, I think, the Forex Bureau associations for a series of discussions aimed at ensuring that the supply of Forex onto the Forex markets is stabilized and the overpricing is also halted, and that people who need access to Forex for legitimate transactions can get same without hindrance in the banking halls and at the Forex bureaus, as against on the black market or using some rates coming from some other quarters.
In the case of Ghana, at the time of independence, we were the leading exporter of cocoa, producer and exporter of cocoa. And an economy that was structured around the production and export of primary products and commodities. All of us know that within the global value chain, raw materials occupy the lowest rung of the value chain. We want to live in an economy, independent in an economy where the products that you deal with are at the higher level of the value chain. So the structure of the economy that we inherited at independence, changing it, transforming it and trying to bring higher value added activity to the system has been the great challenge facing all the governments of Ghana.
K2 North has a lot of potential, and anytime NDC has been in office, we have never abandoned you. We've always made sure you get your fair share of the national cake, and so you can be confident that in the next coming of the NDC, whatever is being shared, K2 North will get its fair share of it. But as I said this morning, we're going to go just beyond infrastructure. We're going to focus on economic transformation this time. We're going to put our investments where our people can make money and put money in their pockets. And so for every constituency, we're going to look at what your economic comparative advantages are. And we will put those investments in so that you can add value to the things you're producing and be able to make money for yourselves.
I have had a swimming school. I've been teaching as a swimming instructor for 7 years, okay? And then I've been working as a social media influencer on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, you name it. And in addition to that, I've been practicing for law. I've been studying for the law to eventually make money in that area. And finally, I've been basically working on my YouTube career as well. How many sources of income did I mention? 4. And I take the trotro every day because I can't afford anything. Are you saying Uber, please? Let's be serious. I saw a tweet that says the politicians probably like their belly full. I do 010 or 001. Do you know what that means? No eating breakfast, no eating lunch. You just eat supper. I'm not even hands to my chest. I say this on my YouTube. I'm very honest. I don't lie. I struggle to even take the trotro sometimes. I'm telling you facts that happen to me. Someone who has 3 sources, 4 sources of income. How? Unless the government is not working. I used to have a car. I used to drive. My brothers and sisters, I used to drive. Right now, for me to be able to afford that car, I just parked there. My dad sold it off. I can't afford this.
But I'm sure there are there's quite a number of you who can actually share in his sentiments that the economy is quite tight. People's disposable incomes have been affected and so on and so forth. But how did we get here, and what should we expect in 2024? Whether things are going to get better or things are going to get worse? We need to know so we know how to plan. If you're earning 1,000 Ghana cedis, you may want to sit down and look at how to restructure your expenditure based on what Professor Boakping is going to tell us. And also, Nana Mwesi is also the man who's going to be walking us through the power sector challenges that we have. Is the executive director of the Institute of Energy Security, is Nana Mwesi the 7th. He's a chief too, so you can expect some more wisdom in his analysis of the power sector. We give a lot of wisdom to our chiefs, don't we? Anyway, so let me start with Professor Boakping, and also welcome Nana Mwesi the 7th. The two of you via Zoom have joined Inside Page this morning. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on Inside Pages.
Yes, good morning. And good morning to our cherished listeners and viewers. Happy New Year.
Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Professor Boakping. It's always a pleasure having you on Inside Pages. A lot of people appreciate your depth of wisdom and knowledge as far as finance and economic issues are concerned. And that's why sometimes the media like to bore you quite a bit. But please bear with us. And also, Nana Mwesi the 7th. I know you're also there. You joined us via Zoom. It's good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Moro, to Prof, and to your viewers.
Right. Thank you so very great. So I'll start with Professor Boakping. Now, Professor Boakping, when an ordinary Ghanaian appears before you, or you rather an ordinary Ghanaian runs into Professor Prof, why is the system so tight? And how did we get here? I'm struggling to make ends meet. What would you tell that person, that ordinary Ghanaian who approaches you and tells you that?
Well, that's a difficult question, right? Because we find ourselves in the situation where you don't need to be an economist to understand the impact of the economy on individuals, households, and businesses, right? We have gone through a very difficult period, actually exiting COVID-19 towards the end of 2020, because it was an election year. Then 2021 thereabout. So it's been quite difficult, but the vulnerabilities were there. Okay, the vulnerabilities were there even before COVID. It's just that we didn't pay attention to those vulnerabilities. And when I say we didn't pay attention, we just gloss over them, thinking that some way, somehow, not through our own decisive actions, things will just suddenly turn out for our good. And obviously, that will be as difficult as asking fish to climb a tree, right? So to the ordinary Ghanaian, I would say I sympathize with them. We are all in this together. but it is also not a case that things are going to improve considerably in the next couple of years. It's also important that Ghanaians understand that. Is that okay? So if you were tightening your belt before, this is not the time to remove the belt at all, because we have the economy at different levels. The state, as we speak right now, is not comfortable. The state is not at rest. So if the state is not asleep, the citizens can't sleep either. The state has messed up its balance sheet. Let's put it that way. So when we say the state has messed up its balance sheet through internal economic mismanagement, we can say that without any apology, because that is what we have done to ourselves. And then, so when we talk about pre-existing vulnerabilities, it's more self-inflicted. Let's put it that way. And then aided by external shocks. We don't have control over those shocks like COVID, Russia, Ukraine, and the rest of them. We've had many of them since independence, and we have been quite vulnerable to almost all of this. In the state's attempt to repair its balance sheet, in other words, in the state's attempt to reset, that is coming at the expense of the citizens, the ordinary Ghanaian you are talking about. Is coming at the expense of businesses. Ordinarily, one could assume that the state exists for the citizens and businesses. The state's primary objective is to create the enabling environment for the citizens and businesses to grow, to thrive. In that process, the state is also rewarded, of course. But it's the opposite we are going through right now, right? So just to give you a little bit of background, from 2020, because it was also an election year, we messed up the fiscal space. We overspent, I think primarily with the election in mind, but then we blame it on COVID also. So if you look at 2020 fiscal deficit, in other words, the extent to which our projected expenditure exceeded our projected revenue, it was one of the highest in Africa, probably the highest relative to the size of our economy. Maybe probably Zambia came second. No wonder these two countries have been knocking on the doors of creditors, right, and some other countries. So we couldn't recover. Then we have Russia, Ukraine, and then all of that. Then we went to IMF. We went to IMF because we wanted macroeconomic stability. Bro, it's quite obvious that when you mismanage your economy, also aided by external shocks, is very costly. It's very costly. I'm putting it in some ordinary way so that we all can associate with it.
Right.
It's very costly trying to correct that distortion. It's very expensive. It's very expensive. Trying to restore macroeconomic stability is going to be costly. It has been costly, and it will still be costly for the next 2-3 years. Let me put it that way. Because even though we have seen some stability, we are not out of the woods, right? There are still difficult paths ahead of us to navigate our way through. That is how we put it. What is the cost? And that is what probably the ordinary Ghanaian is bearing now. What is the cost? The cost is coming from different angles. In economics, we could say the adverse distributional effects, but let's calm down. So the state, in trying to balance its books, is looking at taxes. The state, one basic function of the state is to collect taxes. It does that efficiently and effectively and manages that effectively and efficiently. The redistribution of that wealth should benefit Ghanaians, ordinary Ghanaians, business, and the rest of them. So from 2021, actually, we have gone through different kinds of taxes. This, as though we were not paying enough taxes before. We were. We had been complaining about our tax structure and the rest of it even before COVID came. But you look at Ghana relative to other African countries, either regional peers, structural peers, or our aspirational peers. Since COVID, Ghana has introduced quite draconian tax measures than probably any of these countries. Than any of them. The fact is clear. Okay, over 15 different tax measures, including new taxes or new tax handles, and the rest have been introduced. In that same small economy, this same small economy, Ghana has over 27 different tax heads or tax handles. This small economy, right? So all that, because the state is inefficient, corruption and all of that, we are at a point where the taxes we have been collecting over the years have been proven not to be enough. And it's simply because you have the government that since 1992 keeps expanding and yet is inefficient, keeps expanding. You can check since 1992, you can check the growth in government size and quasi-government institutions. You can check the growth. If you compare that to the growth in businesses, private sector, and household income, you can see the disproportionate relationship. So what that tells you is that the state run by the government that is largely inefficient keeps expanding. Now, how does the state pay for such inefficiency? They look to the citizens and businesses. Taxes, 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 taxes. Now, if you run an inefficient public sector latent with corruption represent cost to households and private sector as they interact with government or public sector institutions. And all of this put together contribute to the high productive cost base of doing business in this country that makes businesses largely unproductive, uncompetitive. That's the fact. Then you can look at how this mismanagement is manifesting. Higher prices, inflation. Okay, 2022 probably looks like a year we should not remember. It was that tough. We ended 2022 with inflation of 54.1%, almost galloping inflation. What that does is that it erodes the purchasing power of the ordinary Ghanaian. And we are talking about inflation of 54.1% 2022. Now 2023, we ended the year 23%. Yes, quite better than 2022, but it's still very high. So in a country where income levels are very low, to see prices rising at that level typifies what the ordinary Ghanaian has had to go through in the last 2.5 years. And that's very unbearable. Why is that so important? And Moro, that's where your question comes from. And I think one of the video or so that you played, somebody was talking about eating once a day.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, somebody was talking about eating once a day.
Yeah.
That is real. I can identify with that. Not that that is what I am rehearsing at home, but I have interacted with people who eat once a day. People where 3 square meals a day looks like theoretical exposition. It's not something they are able to practice. That's real. But look at the more significant issue. When you look at data from Ghana Statistical Service, from the household expenditure survey, food is what constitutes the biggest expenditure item at the household level, including you, including myself, all of us. So food alone takes between 42 and 44% of household expenditure. Food alone. Now, in a country where income levels are very low, when you find that food inflation keeps rising at the level we saw towards the end of 2021 through 2022 and 2023, it tells you that the ordinary Ghanaian had been exposed too much. The vulnerability of the ordinary Ghanaian probably is beyond measure. So when I hear those complaints, we are not faking it. It's real. It's real. Okay. You know, for so many things, through planning, you can manage it. You know, you can defer marriage. You can disengage even after engagement because things are not the way you expected. You can postpone childbirth through family planning. But how long can you defer hunger? Okay. And on daily basis, this is what a lot of Ghanaians are going through. People go to bed in their large numbers, not being sure where their next meal will come from. Can you imagine dealing with that uncertainty on daily basis or for 12 months across 2022, for another 12 months across 2023? That's too much of asking from the ordinary Ghanaian. That's too much. And that is why, Boro, one needs to be very careful when we have to celebrate the progress we have made and claim that the inflation of 2022 was just a blip. It tells us that we are not identifying with the ordinary Ghanaian. There's a large disconnect between the haves and the have-nots. And the haves have no link with the have-nots. Our economy exists at different levels. And probably there's no interaction between the economy of the privileged few at the top and then the economy of the majority, the less privileged at the bottom. And I think that is not fair enough. Okay, and we need to look at that. So those are the dynamics. Tomorrow, the issue we need to appreciate is that though global shocks tend to affect every country, the vulnerability or the resilience of individual countries will show how their citizens will be affected by those common factors. And in the case of Ghana, because we had pre-existing vulnerabilities, we were impacted much more than Ghana's regional peers or structural peers or our aspirational peers. Let's put that way. Of course, every country is going through one form of challenge or the other. So those are the dynamics. So there are still, so these are price that we have to pay. Then we are not done yet. Look at it from the end of 2021, the layers of taxes Ghana has introduced. From this, and essentially from the same tax-paying population, largely from the same tax-paying population. The faithful few, we are just burdening the faithful few. The other thing we need to also bear in mind is that when things are well, they occur at different levels. The levers are not the same. So even the middle class that acted as cushion to the less privileged have been impacted seriously, for which reason individuals' own corporate social responsibility and the rest of them have gone down significantly. The extent to which people who easily help people here and there have equally been impacted. You know, we are like Liverpool, right, as a country. They're citizens. You never sleep alone. You don't eat alone. You don't work alone, right? So your salary is not for you alone. There are so many people who have equally made plans against your own predictable cash flows, which have equally been affected by inflation and the rest of them. So I mean, it hasn't been easy, or it has been an enduring one, coming through 2022 and then through 2023. Of course, government made the right decision by reaching out to the IMF, even though they did so quite lately and reluctantly, I believe. The lack of proactiveness, and I say lack of proactiveness on the part of government in recognizing the danger and the difficulty that was coming, for me, is shocking.
Right.
I say it's shocking because from the third quarter of 2021, the signs were clear that Ghana was heading dangerously. And I believe that what was needful on the part of leadership was to have recognized those dangers much earlier and taken the necessary proactive measures. I know that some measures were put in place in terms of government-owned homegrown policies, including some expenditure cuts, and then the introduction of e-levy. But I felt that that was poorly conceptualized. I'm saying that if you had followed the data and you could predict the trend, what was coming, then you needed to decide the adequacy of your response to that situation. And I believe that government response in the 2022 budget was woefully inadequate, and we lost it. And on that slippery road, they had become very costly trying to restore.
Right.
And that was what occasioned the debt restructuring that we've gone through. Debt restructuring was clearly avoidable. If government had acted proactively at the right time, if they had taken the optimal decision at the right time, domestic debt restructuring was avoidable. But the signs were quite clear from the second quarter of 2021 through to third quarter of 2021. It was quite clear. Look, we exited COVID, right? Almost having similar economic fundamentals like Kenya. Okay, the difference between Kenya in 2022 and Ghana in 2022 was that Kenya proactively reached out to the IMF much earlier than Ghana did. Ghana chose political pride over the common good, right? And that became very costly for all of us. Now, Moro, for the other Ghanaian, what we need to just understand is that the Ghana of old is different from Ghana of today. The traditional fiscal consolidation measures that we had deployed since 1992 in correcting economic distortions, aided by our usual political business cycle through almost all the competitive elections, and then external shocks, commodity shocks, because we are quite susceptible to those shocks, it's no longer enough. This is what we are saying, that you had a certain chronic disease. There was a certain medicine that had always been prescribed. And by taking that medicine, you were largely okay. Now your doctor tells you that your condition has moved to the next stage, such that the prescription you were taking before will no longer be enough. We need to step up. That is where Ghana is now. The traditional fiscal consolidation measures that we had used, made up of revenue enhancement, expenditure restraint, the combination, the pace either front-loaded or the normal one, had been determined not to be enough in our latest IMF engagement. I'm telling you this so that you understand where Ghana finds itself, so that if we are talking about recovery and when it will be well with the ordinary Ghanaian, it gives you an idea of the journey ahead. And I think that what we can tell ourselves now is that we have a long way to go.
Okay.
So we need to be patient. And whilst we are patient, it means that government then must do the right thing and do so consistently. Okay, and I'm sure my good friend on this panel will talk about the energy side.
Yes,
okay?
we'll get there.
The energy, yes. So look at it this way: energy plays a very key role to the whole economic dynamics.
True.
So, and there's no rest in the energy sector. How do you expect rest to businesses that rely on energy? Okay, and the rest of them. And your Happy New Year message from the government was a VAT on electricity consumption above a certain threshold. That's how the government wants to wish you well in 2024. Okay, bear that in mind.
Right. And
Bear
apparently,
that in mind.
right.
If somebody is wishing you Happy New Year with that message, that tells you where we find ourselves, right? And the difficult part ahead of us that we have to navigate. So fiscal consolidation no longer enough. Now we are doing debt restructuring. We've done that in the past, but largely external debt. But now we are trying to restructure our domestic debt. Okay, and in so doing, we have tampered with the financial stability and resilience of our financial sector that we had built on the back of the expensive financial sector cleanup that we did from 2017 through 2018, 2019. So across the broad sectors of our economy, either the finance subsectors, the real sector, and all of that, you can see that vulnerabilities exist. Even though we are talking about relative stability recovery, you can still see vulnerabilities persist. You can judge that also from the composite index of economic activity from Bank of Ghana, right, which is still contracting. The only good news we can take from that is that it's contracting at a much lower pace now than before.
Okay.
Great. But you can see economic activity from the ports that haven't picked up significantly. You can see cement sales that haven't picked up significantly. And that tells you that the construction subsector of the economy, that is also labor intensive, is not picking up. So once that is not picking up, the construction subsector is not doing well, people are not building. If people were building, they will certainly be buying cement. So we use cement demand or sale as a testament of economic activity or resilience, unless the evidence now is that people are now building without cement and iron rods. I would doubt what they will be building then, right? So what it means that once that subsector is not doing well, the majority of Ghanaians who derive their livelihood from that sector really haven't seen any turnaround.
Right.
Okay. And there are other indicators that you can even use vehicle registration data from DVLE and the rest of them and check whether cumulatively over the 4 quarters of 2023, 2024, whether we saw significant pickup from that side and the rest of them. Of course, in terms of other related indicators, we've seen some recovery signs and the rest of them. So yes, we can cherish this.
Okay.
Because it had been a difficult 2022. And therefore, when we see these signs towards the end of 2023, we can say that, yes, we've made some progress, but there's a lot remains to be done. I think that is more important. Then also, we should bear in mind that the progress that we are seeing, that probably some people are taking the credit and having a cocktail over that, is actually coming at the back of the price that ordinary Ghanaians and businesses have had to pay since COVID-19. Prices in terms of higher taxes. Higher taxes. Okay. You just go to the shop and buy something today, and when you check your receipts, VATs and VAT-related taxes alone take more space than actually the items that you bought. It's as though you went there to actually go and buy taxes. Right.
Interesting.
That is what Ghanaians have to go through.
Yeah.
We've introduced, look at the income tax, increase the higher income tax bracket to 35%. Maybe with that you want to make it more progressive. But if you account for all the taxes that the middle class pays, it's more than 60% effectively. Now, if the state takes that much from the citizens, ordinarily there will not be a complaint if that state is efficient in the delivery of public services. If the state is efficient in the delivery of public services in terms of spending on education, there's quality and quantity assured, the infrastructure and the rest of them, health, okay, all of that are being done efficiently, provision of public services, and the state is collecting that much from you and I, ordinarily, it may turn out to be a positive sum game, right? But that is not the case in Ghana. That is where the worry is. The state collects so much from the faithful few, and the state is largely inefficient. Okay. And you look at our health sector. If we are not careful with the exodus, a time will come, you have to go to the hospital with your own doctor. Otherwise, you go there will be nobody there to attend to you. Look at the queues at our hospitals.
Right, Prof, I'll come back to you because we need you to explain to us this. You think about inflation generally, headline inflation. We can look at a subsect, we can look at food inflation, etc. And the theory of marginality and relativity. And this is because you and I have had this off the air conversation where people say, why is it that inflation is coming down, but the rate at which food prices are going up where I live is so high? So then there's a bit of a disconnect between what they hear the government say and what they're actually experiencing in their daily lives. I'll need you to please explain that to us. But let me come to Nana Moise the 7th. Nana, thank you very much for hanging in there. I know you had other things to take care of, but I wanted Prof to finish with the submission, and then I can come to you. Nana, can I please? Is Nana there? Is Nana Moise there?
Yes, Moro.
Well, thank you.
I'm here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much for your patience. I know you had other things to take care of, but you had to actually hang in there so you can join this conversation. Thank you so very much, Nana. So, the power sector, the energy sector, where do things stand as we speak? What's the health of our power sector? We don't want the recent crisis that we've had to face to become a yardstick for mere mortals like us to determine whether the health sector is sick or it is not. You work in that space. This is what you do for a living. Tell us, is the health sector in proper shape? Where are we? What's the status of our health sector? Sorry, our power sector. Sorry.
Let's start this way. Let's try and understand how the sector works and the value chain that we have in there. And so you have somebody who have installed capacity, and that's at the generating plants. Somebody needs to feed that plant with fuel. And when we talk of fuel, we can mention the likes of light crude oil, heavy oil. We can also mention natural gas. Then, of course, we also count the water in the reservoir of Akosombo, Pong, and we as fuel, because that is what is used to run those turbines. Then, of course, after the generation of power, somebody will have to transmit that power to a distributor, and that person is GRICO. It comes to a distributor, and our main distributor in the sector is ECG. We have also the NETCO, but then ECG takes the bulk of our power generated. And so ECG must also work effectively to bring that power received from the transmitter to our homes and businesses. Because the ECG finds itself at the tail end of this value chain, after the power has been given to us, ECG must collect the money and recover all the costs incurred in the supply of fuel, the generation of the power, also the transmission, including its own distribution, activity. That cost must be recovered, and so it must be recovered within the tariff that we have to pay. Unfortunately, the key player that we so much depend on as ECG and all the utilities rely on for their own financial stability and operational efficiency loses almost 30% of the power given to them to distribute. And it's either through a commercial reason or through technical, challenges, they lose power. And it means that if you give them about 1,000 megawatts at a cost of 1 million Ghana cedis, they won't be able to account for 30% of this, roughly 30% of this. And so it means that day in, day out, what we receive as revenue from the sector is far lower than the cost incurred in the sector. And so that gap you see there creates a financial challenge for all the sector players. That's why at one moment you hear generators or IPP say, pay us what is due us or we shut down. We've been threatened severally. And you also get the indication from even a transmitter of this natural gas fuel to the power plant, which I forgot to bring in the equation, WAPCO, also threatened frequently and, compel us to go into doomsday because they are unwilling to move the natural gas. And so you can't say that the health sector is healthy to the extent that there are financial constraints and financial challenges that impact on the so much desired, reliable, consistent supply of power. And so the power sector is not in a good condition.
Now, the recent power outages that we have been suffering, and I'm sure today, if you go to certain areas, they're still facing the same problem. How did it come about? And is that a sign that we're in for some serious crisis, or this is something that we can easily nip in the bud?
Well, of course, at this moment, to the extent that we have financial challenge in the power sector, we must begin to tackle all the issues around this with the mind that we are in crisis. I am in my village at Ekunfi, Abor. We are having our funeral, major funerals. Every household has to go and rent, a power plant as a standby, because the assurance that we'll have power during the day, it's not there. Yesterday we experienced same. We pray that today we must have power so we can reserve and probably keep our money and not incur more cost. But then what's really occurred over the last few days? Now at Tuabo, today we have almost all the power plants, and when I say power plants, I mean the thermal ones, relying on natural gas. At Tuabo, process the natural gas, move it from Atuabo all the way to the Abuadi Enclave, the Western Corridor. That pipeline is operated by GMPC, owned by GMPC. So we are safe. Now, when it terminates at the Atuabo Enclave, the excess gas must be moved from the Western Corridor to the Eastern Corridor, and that's the Tema Enclave. That pipeline that connects the Atuabo to the Tema Enclave is owned and operated by WAPCO. So there's West Africa Gas Pipeline and the operator being the WAPCO of the same line. And so they are moving the natural gas from the Western Corridor to the Eastern on the instruction of GMPC, the owner of the commodity, the natural gas. As we speak today, GMPC owes, WAPCO in excess of $50 million. We're getting the indication that some intervention has been made. But if I was have to relate to the last 4 days, we owe them more than $24 million. And it's a debt that keep on mounting. And the guys will come and say, please pay us because our debts are going up. We can't be sure what tomorrow will be like. Get us our money. GMPC and ECG, that's our government institution that must cooperate to respond to them, sometimes responds late. And the company is compelled to shut down the valve. It means that gas flow is restricted from the Western Corridor to the Eastern Corridor, compelling all the power plants in the Tema Enclave or the Eastern Corridor to shut down, except for, Asogli, that was fortunate to receive some natural gas flow from Nigeria. And even Asogli, that is in position to generate about 550 megawatts, was compelled to generate something around 200 megawatts because the gas flow from Nigeria too was not enough. And so what happened was a restriction of a natural gas flow to the power plants to make them work effectively because government owes somebody. And the person is bent on collecting the money by taking up that step of shutting down a valve.
Wow, that's serious. The government says it's settled. It's reached some agreement with most of the IPPs. It's settled almost all the debts. There's only, I think, 2 IPPs or so the government says it's still negotiating with. But let's move away from that because for now it appears that the situation has improved. And so really you won't say that there's any serious cause for alarm until government is unable to prove beyond reasonable doubt that he can pay. I think is that what it is, Nana?
That's what we can assume.
Okay.
But that may not be the situation.
Sure. All right. Let's do this. Let's just quickly, before you take leave of us, this new 15% or so VAT, which has been slapped on residential consumers, help us understand how this is going to affect us. We're told minus those who consume, minus lifeline consumers. And even the lifeline consumers, we're told, is now been moved from 50 kilowatts per hour to now 30. Put all of this together and help us understand how this is going to affect us. I mean, say if I was buying 1,000 Ghana cedis a month, what should I be looking at?
Well, you should be looking at paying more for
electricity.
Electricity that's consumed per every kilowatt of power that you consume. You must pay more compared to your initial or previous position. And so when government levies electricity as a commodity, then it is choosing to increase the tariff for consumers. And so basically, we have to pay more for electricity that we consume. And we find it at IES as retrogressive. And in fact, it will come back to hurt the same sector that government believe that I need to raise revenue for through taxation. It may come to hurt it. Because when people find it difficult to pay the bills, they may be looking for bypasses. And that's where you can have thefts increasing, even with the collision, in collision with the UCG staff, as we have come to know. That is one. And so when people steal power, your expected revenue is reduced. The next is that when I find it difficult to pay the tariff,
Well, I hope that it looks like we have a connection.
And
challenge.
I see that, look, tomorrow, sorry.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead, sir.
I'm going to do this work. I need more than 1,000 kilowatts hour of power to do. It's going to cost me.
Well, we seem to have
maybe 1 million. I compare it to using a standby generator. I will really fall on a standby generator and depart from the grid, the government produced power.
Well, we seem to have a challenge with the connection to Nanam. See the 7th. I was so sorry about that. We'll come back to Professor Bokwe to wrap up.
So you have...
Okay. All right. Well, so sorry about that. These things happen sometimes. Let me just do some text messages just quickly before I bring in Professor Bokwe to wrap up. It's about, we're 5 more minutes to leave here. So this one said, good morning, great discussions, Mr. Morado and your resource persons. What I can say is that times are hard and the government must sit up because we really can't deal with this economic hardship we've never seen before. That's coming from Nanaye Champo in Koforidia. Mr. Moro, it beats my mind why our leaders avoid good brains like Professor Bokwe, Joe Jackson, and the likes for advice and rely on their party economic mediocre. What was that? Okay. Okay, so mediocre brains or something like that. to bring the country to where we are now. I believe strongly some people must pay dearly for this unpardonable act. God bless Ghana. Some from her true. It's quite a number of messages. Let's wrap up with Professor Bopping. Professor Bopping, we have just 5 minutes to leave here, but help us understand. So help us understand the issues about inflation and how people say, well, I live here, but inflation is this, is high where I am, and so on. Just briefly on that. And then finally, we're told to be, to say hooray because we've reached an agreement with our official bilateral creditors, well, mainly China and France. And what does that mean for the 600 million that we're expecting from the IMF? Is it coming, and how soon? So this two in one, if you can do it in 5 minutes, I'll be very happy, sir.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Usually when we talk about inflation, what we report usually in the media is the headline inflation and is the average.
Okay.
Right. But inflation varies from region to region, from district to district. Again, inflation varies from individual to individual. So you may find the same Ghanaians complaining, but they carry different inflation rate because their consumption basket is different.
True.
Okay, so that is how we see inflation. So even though we are talking about the fact that food inflation has come down, Moro, because food takes a larger share of household expenditure, look at what is happening with food inflation. Food inflation is more than 27%, even though the average inflation is 23.2% December 2023. Okay, so you can see that food inflation is still very high. That is not the only thing. Moro, just look at the variation of food inflation across regions. In the eastern region of Ghana, food inflation is 51.3%. So you see the people in the eastern region haven't turned the corner when it comes to food inflation, right? Food inflation, eastern region, 51.3%. Food inflation, northern region, 36.6%. Upper west, 36.6%. Western north, 35%. So you can see marginality. You can see differences from region, depending on where you live, where you eat from. Prices could be higher relative to other places, but overall, food inflation is still very high. But if you look at the disaggregation, that's where my interest is. If you look at food items that should promote health, it's more expensive, and I think government needs to take another look. This requires targeted policies. When it comes to vegetables, tubers, plantains, cooking bananas, and the rest of them, the price is very high. It's very, very high. Then again, when it comes to other items, so those differences still exist. So some level of inclusivity is lacking in here in the economic recovery. Regional disaggregation shows wide marginality, and that needs to be looked at going forward. Again, back to the bigger issue. I'll say it's the bigger issue because the whole IMF supported program is conditional on how well we perform with our external debt restructuring, which is quite key. At least the good news is that we have scaled an important war, which is securing the agreement from the official creditor committee, which has been a condition precedent to we getting board approval for our first review of the IMF supported program. And now that we have secured that, the IMF itself has tweeted that they are happy with that, which means that in the next couple of weeks, probably next week, the board will be meeting. It's a working board, right? So the board will be meeting to approve that. But remember, that unlocks $600 million. Of course, we can also unlock some inflows from the World Bank and then other development partners, but that is not significant, right? Between now and 2026, we still have a lot of grounds that we have to cover. And that is not to also suggest that the $600 million is what will actually cause some magic in our economy overall. Remember, in the time past, we've been borrowing $3 billion from the Eurobond, and we didn't really have much to show for and all of that. But at least it represents good news because a significant headwind has been lifted in terms of we making progress with the IMF supported program. The good news also is that once we scale that war, it also boosts confidence in our economy in terms of investors and the rest of them. But we need to balance all of this within the risk of the 2024 elections. And I believe that that is where some Ghanaians may get some relief because in an election year, politicians spend, and in that spending, that injection of liquidity, some can benefit ordinary Ghanaians whose livelihood are keenly indexed to political activities and the rest of them. Some follow, they get hampers, some get food and all of that. The rental industry, the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, likely to receive some kind of good patronage in an election year and all of that. But overall, the advice would be that we would encourage the government not to sacrifice the limited gains, progress that we have made under the IMF program for the 2024 election. Government must preserve fiscal space and learn more towards fiscal discipline so that the limited gains we have made, we are able to preserve it and build on that for the foreseeable future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Professor. Weekend. Thank you so very much, Professor Godfrey Mboping, for joining us today on Inside Page. It's been wonderful talking to you. I also want to say a big thanks to Nanam Wesi, the seventh. Unfortunately, your submission had to end at some point due to the connection challenges. I also want to thank Mustafa Bandi for joining us, Deputy General Secretary of the NDC. My name is Aldumuro. Thanks to the team that made it possible, Michael and the rest of you, and also my man, what's the name again? Tornado. Yes, Tornado. The sound guy is here. Jesse is here. Evans and the MCR guys and my man called Azay. Jesse, the superstar, is also here. Alex, my man, he calls me King. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.